Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm super excited. I'm Brian Bourgerie with Invest Puerto Rico, and we'll be talking about why Puerto Rico is the place to be to build your company, build your blockchain protocols, build your community, investor network, pretty much all the things. We have a really great panel, which I'll introduce in just a little bit. As the last few stragglers are jumping on, I'm going to explain a little bit initially about Invest Puerto Rico for those who maybe don't know. Invest Puerto Rico is the official business and investment attraction agency for the island of Puerto Rico. We are a nonprofit, a public-private partnership. We work in conjunction with the government and the Department of Economic Development and Commerce, but we are in charge of helping companies, investors, innovators all come to the island, get established, plug in with what you need, and hopefully set up shop and start building awesome things from the island. So high level on some of the things that we help with. We help, one, just with awareness and understanding Puerto Rico as it truly is, things that maybe you don't hear in the news, interesting facts and data points that are really important to understand for your business, for your livelihoods if you decide to move here with families or anything like that. Hitting on things from talent to business regulations, to investment opportunities and expansion opportunities, everything across the board. So we have an entire team here to help you guys with all of that. Today specifically, we're going to be hitting on, like I said before, why Puerto Rico is the place to be, especially on this half of the world, but honestly anywhere. As you're building out new innovative technologies, there's a big community here that's been growing for years, particularly in the decentralized technology space. Many will call Web3, DLTs, blockchain, crypto, all the above. And we'll be diving deeper into what that looks like, hearing from some people who are in that community, who have made the move, including myself, actually, and what were the reasonings and decision points behind that. And then we'll also have some time at the end that we can answer some questions. So if you do have questions throughout this webinar, feel free to put them in the chat. We will get to them at the end. We won't answer them in real time until the Q&A section, but if you think of it, put it in the chat and we'll try to answer as many of the relevant questions as we can. If you have questions that don't really pertain to what we're talking about today, as a lot of you probably do, you can always go to our website, which is investpr.org, and submit those questions in the Contact Us form, and one of our representatives will reach out to you. So without further ado, let's bring up our panelists. And as we're bringing up our panelists, I'll just hit one little baseline, because one of the most common questions that we have is about tax incentives. We will hit on tax incentives. We're not going to go into every intricate detail. We're not lawyers, we're not investment advisors, but we will kind of lay the baseline of those incentives for everybody. But before we dive into the details of that, let's introduce our panelists. So with us today, we have Benjamin Brown with Chainwave, Hannah Rosenberg with Velas Commerce, and Timothy Lewis with tea.xyz. So let's just get going. Ben, do you want to share briefly who you are, what you're working on, and then we'll go cycle through to Hannah and Tim and go from there.
Sure. My name is Benjamin Brown. I'm a software engineer by trade. I spent 15 years in Chicago, Illinois, developing software at various companies. I actually met Hannah there in Chicago, of all places. Got into crypto in 2012, 2013, did well with that. 2018, I decided to move to Puerto Rico and form Chainwave, which is a blockchain application development agency. So we build blockchain applications across the board for our clients across the world. So entrepreneurs, private equity groups, they come to us, they say, hey, we want to get into this space. We have this idea. And then Chainwave comes and we help formulate that idea into an actual application. So we fit at the front end of most of these ventures, entry point into the blockchain space.
Cool. Hannah.
All right. I actually have a story very similar to Benjamin's. I'm from Chicago, worked in software in Chicago for years, also fell in love with Bitcoin in 2012. So I've been in the space for a while. Right now, me and my husband run a business called Velas Commerce, where we do a similar business model to what Benjamin does, but we focus specifically on Bitcoin and Lightning integrations. So a business that's maybe looking to add Lightning functionality or Lightning payments to an application or whatever system it is they're running, they would come to us for help with that. We have a team of developers that help them with that, and we've been here in Puerto Rico about a year and a half now.
Awesome. Timothy.
So I too spent a bunch of time in Chicago. Didn't have any the fortune of meeting either of them there, but spent my 2012 to 2019 period in Los Angeles. I had run into Bitcoin in 2010, but really fell in love with it in 2012. There was an infection of people in LA that were really excited about it, and I became excited about it too. But I'm a software developer by trade, primarily security engineering and development for banks and financial institutions. I have had several successful companies along my route, but really was with the launch of Ethereum that I found my own space and was able to really start being more free with my time and my creative ability. Along the way, I founded a largely successful hedge fund that is also operating in Puerto Rico, as well as a developers DAO, tea.xyz DAO. We've given out over 12 million euros in grant value to open source software over the last year and a half. My most recent company is called tea.xyz. This is a software development company. We're manufacturing software in the heart of Old San Juan. Very excited about that. But it is a migration of a very successful open source, a sequel to a very successful open source project called Homebrew. Homebrew is a software that's used by over 100 million people yearly. 40 million developers rely on it as their primary package manager. And it was founded by my co-founder, Max Howell, who is a good dear friend of mine. And we launched Tea last December as a company, and just launched our software about 30 days ago.
Awesome. I hadn't planned on the Chicago connection when we built out this panel, but I think if anyone's listening from Chicago, you might as well just move here. I mean, you don't really need to ask any other questions. That being said, I'm actually from Minnesota, not quite, but maybe it's something about getting out of the cold, although I love snow. I actually came down here almost 5 years ago with one of our companies. It's actually a hardware company that tied into blockchain, and we created a blockchain development company here to service that hardware company. That's where I met Ben. We actually worked together and collaborated on some things for a time early on. And I've spent a lot of time. I'm probably the least technical out of the people on this group, although more technical than your average Joe. But really building out companies and from hardware and software standpoint, as well as the servicing, capital raising aspects of things as well. So there's a lot of reasons to come down. But just jumping into a few things, we're going to kind of go reverse. Timothy, will you continue a little bit more on your decision points? Like, how did Puerto Rico come on the map for you, and what did that look like deciding to come build here?
I had come for vacation once prior to Hurricane Maria, and then just after there was an event called Restart Puerto Rico here, which was the first of now many of these Puerto Rico blockchain weeks. And I had been involved in the Bitcoin, blockchain, now Web3 area for many years, traveling around to many places. But the community that was building here and driving many of my friends from LA to move to Puerto Rico was exciting. And obviously the incentives are a large part of the equation, but the adventure and the opportunity here is what makes it really fun, interesting, and exciting. And now the gathering of the community. I've seen this so far developed in the last 4 years. I didn't make the full-time move down here until this last year, but I had been traveling back and forth. Really, did fall in love with the some of the things that the weather, the the beaches, the ocean, the sport, the activity, and nature in here, which was incredible. But then also being able to have the community that I was used to, the brain trust, being here, which was a major deciding factor. So brought me down here, excited to be in Puerto Rico and excited to help promote this community because it only gets better as more people come down and invest their time in Puerto Rico.
Awesome. Hannah, what about you? What was that process like for you, finding out about Puerto Rico and coming down here?
Yeah, Puerto Rico had been sort of on the radar for a number of years, but me and my husband, we're both from Chicago, but we had gone and lived in Australia for years, and then we came back for family, and we kind of knew that we didn't want to stay in Chicago real long term, so we had kind of been looking around. We wanted to go somewhere warm and Spanish speaking, so we had been to parts of Mexico, Panama, et cetera. And then we were just, in the middle of the pandemic in our tiny little Chicago apartment with 2 kids doing school from home in February, and it's too cold to leave the house. And we're like, that's it, we're done. We're just going straight to Puerto Rico. And I went down for a couple of days just to check it out, to make sure, it was a real place and it was, felt safe and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, this is lovely. And we came on down, and it's just, it's such a good deal for us because it really is like a pretty decent lifestyle down here. And you don't have to do immigration. You just show up and, it's all your bank cards work, no conversion of any currency. Like it's really was a very, very easy move. And it's just been a really beautiful place. So yeah, we're quite happy with the move.
Awesome. And Ben, what about you? Walk us through your experience.
Yeah, I came directly after Hurricane Maria, so maybe I think I visited 2 or 3 times between January and March, and then I moved here in March or April of 2018. I saw it, like Timothy said, I saw it as an adventure, an entrepreneurial adventure. I felt that the incentives would draw like-minded entrepreneurs that are pushing the boundaries of what they can do, and that idea has kind of come true over the past 4.5, almost 5 years. Where we've seen the rapid growth of the community, thanks to Brian and others who lead community events of entrepreneurs outside of blockchain, even, everything, ad tech, there's Amazon, FBS people down here, there's influencers moving down here. So it's across the board, and it's reflective of both the incentives, the island lifestyle, and also kind of that adventurous mindset of the type of entrepreneurs that are coming down here.
For sure. Yeah, similar. I came down, I think, Super Bowl weekend in February of 2018 initially. Puerto Rico's always been on the map. I actually have family who lives on Vieques. So my first time ever on an airplane was coming down here, although I never thought I'd live in Puerto Rico. Even when I knew about the incentives, running some businesses, we were in Utah at the time, it wasn't quite enough, but we did come down in early 2018 and scope things out. And really despite being shortly after a once in a century hurricane, even the people who we connected with, not just in blockchain, but in general, from the accelerators and incubators and service providers and government people we were able to plug into within the first 24 hours, it kind of blew my mind, and it was super exciting. And by the end of that trip, we pretty much had decided to a degree, had to check with our spouses first, that we wanted to move and set up shop. And once we came down with the family to scope it out, got the okay, and the rest is history. That's actually one of the things too. So many times when you're picking up and moving your business, it's not a simple ordeal for a number of reasons. And especially if you have a family. And that's one thing to address. I know at least a couple of us on here have kids. I have 4 kids. We've had kids born here on the island as well. We have hospitals and everything. So things are here. It will be different. Not everything's exactly the same as the States, although we are part of the US. But we do have care and insurance and everything here. Actually having our twins, I think with our insurance, I only spent like $152 for having twins and spending a week in the hospital. So I'm not going to complain about that. And when it comes to options for plugging in with your family, there are different options. The majority of the public schools maybe aren't the best right now, although they're being worked on, but there are a lot of options when it comes to big, small private schools, Montessori. There's a lot of unschooling and homeschooling groups that have been popping up, and alternative learning groups and things like that. So there are different options depending what you're looking to do. So for those coming with a family, also just know like lots do that. And this can be an amazing place for families. That being said, there's lots of different parts of the island to move into. Many times you're going to hear about setting up in the San Juan metro area, which of course is great, makes a lot of sense for a lot of businesses, but we have people and industry across the entire island, all the way on the west side. If you like to surf a lot and want to be somewhere like that, if you want to be in more enclosed communities like Palmas or Dorado, you can do things like that. If you want to live in the mountains, we used to live on the side of a mountain without anyone around and no fences or anything, and that was also great. So there is really something for almost everyone. I mean, it's not for everybody, but there is something for almost everybody, I'd say, if you're really looking to make the move. Just make sure you look around and scope things out, both personally and for your business. We have 3 international airports dotted across the island, lots of seaports. So you don't have to automatically think you can only go to one geographic location on the island when you're making that move. So incentives was brought up. So let's dive into that just a little bit more. In that case, for a high level, and all of this information you can find at investpr.org as well. For export services, that's going to be where the majority, between export services and manufacturing, is where the majority of those who are building, especially in software, are going to fall under for tax incentive. On export service, it's just like it sounds. If there's any service that you are exporting anywhere else in the world that's not in Puerto Rico, that can be qualified in tax at 4%. So if you're doing development servicing or anything like that, that's just taxed at 4%. Now, manufacturing also is 4%, not tied to if you're selling on or off the island. It doesn't matter where that's being done, but software development, for new software development, let's say, does fall into manufacturing and that incentive. One of the nice things about that incentive, and one of the main reasons that really got me excited when we moved our company here, is the R&D tax credits. So in addition to having a 4% corporate tax rate, and there are no federal income taxes, personal or business, in Puerto Rico, in addition to having that 4%, we could get up to 50% of all of our research and development expenditures that are done on the island back in a tax credit. And if you're like us and you're a startup losing money and didn't need a tax credit, we actually have an open market for those credits. And you can sell those. I've seen some sell for 96 cents on the dollar. Normally it's between 88 and 93, but you can be getting thousands back in cash based on those tax credits on a yearly basis. And you can do that every year. So that's huge if you're doing R&D work, which I'd say a lot of people in technology in general are doing. So that's a really big one. Another thing to be aware of on the incentives front, that although 4% is the standard or the baseline, if you're a micro enterprise, there's another election. You have to make sure to bring it up when you're applying for your incentive. But if you make less than $3 million a year, that can actually be dropped down to 2%. So if you're small and growing, you can lower that even more. So that's very, very interesting. That being said, there are other incentives. We won't go into all the details of the other ones, but there's incentives for almost everything. There's renewable energy, there's creative industries, there's hospitality, there's investment funds. There's a lot of different incentives here in Puerto Rico. And again, you can go to investpr.org to dive in deeper and reach out to one of my colleagues to learn more on that front. But with these incentives, obviously that supercharges your business. Just like anything you're going to do, make sure it makes sense for you personally and in your business without an incentive. And then the incentives is pretty much cherries on top. Now, if you have a big operation that you're bringing down that is going to be hiring dozens of people and or investing a lot of money into the island. There can sometimes be other incentives or cash grants and things provided by the government. That's on a case-by-case basis. No one's guaranteed that. But for those that can demonstrate that they'll be bringing a lot of economic benefit, creating hundreds of jobs, even sometimes more, there's other incentives that go beyond what you normally hear about. So that's something to explore into. One of the questions that I'm just going to address really quick that someone dropped in, asking if children born in PR are not subject to inheritance tax. I'm not a lawyer. I would say on a short level, yes and no, depending on if they stay in Puerto Rico for their entire lives or not. But that's a little more complicated than just a simple yes or no. So we'll defer that to off the webinar to discuss those details. But good question. That being said, while we're still on the topic of incentives, Hannah or Timothy or Benjamin, do either of you have any experiences or anything else to plug in on how the incentives have helped your business or any other businesses you've seen here on the island?
I'll just say personally, I mean, we're at the end of the year and you have to often think about your taxable income. You also have to think about your taxable revenue from a business perspective and from a personal perspective. And this is my first year of full qualification, being a part of the incentive program here in our first year of business. It has made my life so much easier to be able to look at revenue that's coming in and also my personal liability and understand that I have additional value that I can use to exercise on the business. I also am looking at a lot of the R&D tax credits. Very, very excited over the next few weeks to determine what those are. That extends, we are just launching our first products now, just getting into revenue now. Understanding that this year I'm going to be able to go back in and get tax credits and again look to that secondary market. My investors, a large majority of them were from Puerto Rico, but the other investors that are global, they look upon me as a founder to maximize the dollars spent, maximize the investment spent on a business. And really, I placed the fact that this was a Act 60 business, an incentive-based business here in Puerto Rico as front and center, to being able to prove to them that I, as an entrepreneur, am going to find every route possible to be able to extend and be creative with the capital that I receive. So this being that first year, very much looking forward to seeing what I can redeem on the R&D side, because we did have the large majority of our work that was R&D this year, to be able to help extend my roadmap and my runway for the business.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's one of the things too, is there's a few funds even both on and off the island that I'm aware of that make it a requirement or a strong suggestion for companies to actually set up operations, whether it's entirely or partly here in Puerto Rico, for those exact reasons, because their investor dollar goes further and they're able to do more, accomplish more, and hopefully generate a bigger return in the end, and hopefully create better products for more people. So that is one thing. Something I didn't mention, but relevant to most people who are probably listening to this, whether you're a business owner, an investor. On the personal side, there is the personal individual investor tax incentive where you can pay zero tax on your capital gains, dividends, interest, and distributions that are Puerto Rico sourced, or essentially from when you start becoming, once you've applied, been approved, and are a legitimate Puerto Rico resident. We won't go into every detail of that. We have lots of information on that as well. But that's another one. The business incentives coupled with the individual incentives really makes for an interesting piece. That being said, I actually want to move on a little bit to keep things going and talk about, in my opinion, what's even more important than any incentives or anything else. And that's the community that is developed here. And we've heard words like brain trust and other things from some of you, but Ben, will you kind of dive into a little bit more? You mentioned it, what you found in the community and what you see here happening, whether it's in blockchain or a part just kind of give your viewpoint.
Yeah, for sure. It's so I have the unique perspective of being around as long as you have, Brian. I know you have done a great job with your events that you've thrown to support the community. So really appreciate it. Just want to shout out to you. But yeah, I've seen from the inception of being here in 2018, it was kind of all crypto bros and kind of solopreneur trader types, right, across the board. I'd call them swashbucklers to keep in theme with the Caribbean, right? And it was a little frustrating because it was hard to do business with, I think, those type of groups, and like a lot of the events were focused around those type of groups. But in the past year and a half, especially 2021, I just noticed a huge influx of people across the board. I think it's part of the federal policies that are going on as well. People are looking for alternatives. It's part of a growing community of just general people that want to optimize their tax structure. And I think there's a lot of wealth of information out online now where people can find it. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, optimizing your tax structure is something only for the elites. But now, smaller businesses can participate, and the communities are forming around that. And I think that's really powerful.
Got it. Hannah, what about you? What have you found plugging in and since you've moved here?
Yeah. So it was an easy decision to leave Chicago, especially with everything that was going on in that moment in time. But one of the hardest parts about leaving Chicago is that I had a really big community in Chicago. I was running the Bitcoin and open blockchain meetup there in Chicago. I had been running it for like 5 years. So I had this huge community and huge network. And that was one of the hardest, obviously family, but after that was one of the hardest things to leave coming down here. But it's been really nice because it's a bit less Bitcoin focused, some of the community down here, a little more broadly crypto. But there is really big community here. And it's been really lovely to dive into that. And Brian, I've gone to some of your events and there's all kinds of different events around here. So it has been really quite nice. And we've picked up some projects from people we've met on the island. It's been a very good community to be part of, just from a human aspect and then also from a business aspect as well. So that's been really nice. And
sure.
It's, wide variety of people, I would say. Like I haven't had Benjamin's experience with just trader crypto bros. Definitely ran into a lot of those, but it's been a wide spectrum of people. Yeah.
Well, I'll reiterate that too. Like we have 3 of our groups that we work with are based out of Puerto Rico as well. So we've also, found value in those relationships we built down here.
Yeah, and Ben, just real quick, you have employees based here as well. I mean, you have a global organization, but you have employees that are based in Puerto Rico as well.
We do. We have 6 people in 2022 that have been working out of Puerto Rico, and then plans for next year to expand that more.
Awesome.
And our lead developer at the moment is Puerto Rico. So we were able to find some talent down here as well.
Yeah, we hired developers here on the island when we came as well.
Yeah. I'll mention that some of the things that I've gotten more involved with in the last couple of years here have been a lot of the dinner groups. There've been a lot of these people that self-organize to create really great recurring dinner experiences, which has been fantastic. There's oftentimes an NFL-related group that everyone gets together. Many people get together, hundreds of people get together to have these hosted NFL parties, which is a lot of fun as well. And then, we now at the Tea House, we are hosting a lot of dinners, events, but a lot of workshops. So we bring together a lot of people on the technical side and hold dev group workshops and hackathons and different things. So, it is a very self-organized community. So there are a lot of the people that are driven to create community here. So it's been very easy to, there were a lot of people that I did know from LA and some from Chicago as well that had moved down here. But the introduction and trying to understand who people are is quite easy because there are oftentimes these groups that have more or less validated people that come down here. One of the things I find interesting about going through the Act 60 process and coming down here is the fact that those that do complete and get recognized for it have all gone through a background check. which actually I like. So, when you have this kind of this gathering of people that are of varying success, it is nice to know that if you can validate the people that you're around by that distinction. Not everyone is, and that's great. And there many other people should come down here for other reasons, but it is drawn a lot of really great people, and the community it's created, I think, is a safe one and an inviting one.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that really, energizes me for everything that I do, quite frankly, on the community aspect, is you'll hear me talk about how, in my opinion, Puerto Rico is kind of like a 21st century frontier, not from like an old Western land grab type, but a frontier of innovation, of collaboration, of ideas, and it's a really good place to connect with top-notch people, top talent. We hit on talent a little bit, but most people don't know, like, we graduate 26,000 STEM graduates a year, #1 producer of engineers for NASA. Like, we have so much. We're one of the top in the entire world, I think in the top 2 for per capita STEM degree graduates, things like that. So there's natural talent. Probably our biggest export is as an island, realistically, is the talent that we have, even more than anything else. But from the natural talent and beauty here, to also the types of people who have moved down, because to move to an island with your business and or family isn't a trivial thing. And I find that the type of people who make the move tend to be more open-minded, more collaborative, more giving, on a high level, just nicer people, I think, than maybe some areas in New York or Chicago or California. And that allows not just for a lot of collaborations, but also a lot of knowledge transfer. So there's so much knowledge transfer. And as you were mentioning, Timothy, is when you connect with people who are at the top of their industry, and it could be any industry. Realistically, in my rough numbers, these are not exact, but the rough numbers I've been running, still, although blockchain and Web3 is big here on the island, it's still a far minority of those who are moving down here and innovating and doing amazing things. It's still a minority. So you're plugging into tops of industries in bioscience and machine learning and agriculture and all sorts of different things, which also makes for some really interesting collaborations and projects, whether it's distributed energy grids and all sorts of stuff, which we won't have time to get into, but there's a lot going on. So that's one thing that I do want to make sure we reiterate, is just the ecosystem and community and the ability to connect across the board, whether it's in industry or cross industry, is better than anywhere I've ever been, quite frankly, and a lot more accessible. I haven't lived anywhere else or even visited anywhere else where I can be at an event, have a first semester college student sitting down right next to a billionaire and have the conversation struck up and not have it be awkward or anyone's better than the other. So just that type of connection, I think, is amazing. And with the different groups that keep coming out of the woodwork. I found a group that I got into Bitcoin in 2011, spent it all in 2012 on t-shirts and stupid things. But I found someone, a young guy, had grown up in the southwest part of the island. He got into Bitcoin in 2010, before I even did, very early on, and had an entire group of like 300 people that he had been curating over the last 10 years that I had no idea even existed. But I find little nuggets and pockets like that on the island, whether it's homegrown or people who moved here. I think there's a really good dichotomy. And then we have organizations that have popped up and grown stronger over the years. We have the Puerto Rico Blockchain Trade Association. Last week was Puerto Rico Blockchain Week. And what I love about Blockchain Week, what I love and hate about Blockchain Week, which I try to help out with as much as I can, is it's more of a distributed, decentralized Blockchain Week. There's not one group that is paying and running the whole thing. We're on chats. We have all these different conferences coming together. We have the calendar that we kind of just throw all of our things on, and it's really crowdsourced and community empowered. And really takes coordination and collaboration between those who are putting on the bigger conferences as well. So shout out to everyone who's involved in that. But it also just shows that we have an ecosystem that works, builds, and grows together. And I think that is good for everyone. And it doesn't matter if you're a small company or a large company. I think that's very important to plug into. So a couple more things to hit on, and then we'll start getting into some Q&A. Just for those, because I know some people who are tuning in are probably running bigger operations or working with bigger companies. There are some very exciting things on the horizon here on the island and that are already being worked on that will be good to plug into for larger groups and companies. I know that MasterCard's been getting into more things globally when it comes to Web3 and crypto and things like that. We have universities on the island that are working with groups like Evolving Space and others and training lots of blockchain developers. Terminal 34 is training blockchain developers, Holberton School. We have a bunch, Polytechnica University. There are a lot that are really diving in and starting to create curriculums or already have been working on training. And then Timothy, I love how you guys started doing, I think, hacker hangouts and there's other groups and places like Engine 4 that have maker spaces and are teaching kids how to build on Raspberry Pis and 3D print and robot gardens and all sorts of stuff. So there is infrastructure and there are groups. We have the Puerto Rico 5G zone and blockchain ignition lab where you can come in and be testing out IoT and where blockchain meets cybersecurity, which meets telecommunications. So there's actually very good infrastructure on the island to be plugging in on a hardware standpoint, as well as just the software and protocol layer standpoint as well. So there's a lot to really dive into. Last round of questions for the panelists before we answer some of the community questions. What is something that you either wish you would have known before you came to set up company in your life here on the island, or what's a piece of advice, it could be one and the same, for a company or group that's looking to set up and build from the island of Puerto Rico? Let's start with Hannah, go Timothy, and then Ben.
So I would say actually things were easier than I would thought they would have been. So if I go back and tell myself there wouldn't be anything specifically I would warn myself about, there is some loss of convenience moving here. But I think if you're from a big city in the United States, you are living at the absolute height of human convenience, right? So you go anywhere outside that, there's going to be a little bit of a loss of convenience. So the electric grid does have issues here. Amazon takes longer, these sorts of things. But all in all, really, like, you're able to live a really pleasant lifestyle down here. We have, for me, sunshine is a massive thing. So to just have, I was just out on my terrace today, just before this, just laying down and catching some sun, which is just amazing. And so really the moving down here, we had a little bit of trouble finding an apartment when we first showed up. There seemed to be a lot of competition for that. So that was a bit of an issue. And Español de Puerto Rico es muy difícil. It's very hard to understand the Spanish here. So it's not like Mexican Spanish, which I was used to. So those would be the only two issues that I really ran into. Is when we first showed up, I think it was just our timing. It was really hard to find an apartment. And then the Spanish was much more difficult than I was expecting. But otherwise, I think I'm surprised at how easy it is, just logistically, sort of, it's not much different from moving inside the states from one state to another. So it was really much smoother than I would have thought it was been. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll reiterate. I think the expectations on shipping is one thing just to center in on, but it's not a problem. You understand the time things do get here. That's not it's usually not an issue. Larger things, you learn how to ship via larger shipping services. Importing, I've learned a little bit more about importing than I had known before, but things are not things are not unobtainable, and it becomes once you have the process down once, it's easy to replicate. But many of the big box stores are here. Costco's here, Best Buy's here, Walmart's here. You can go out and get most of the things that you'd want to at an instant. The freshness of fruit at the Best Buy exists. You can go get all the things that you were used to, or I was used to in LA. So that's not a problem. I took 4 years of Spanish in school. I wish maybe I had brushed up more, but as long, from my perception, having traveled many places in the world, the people here are so friendly and so patient, and being open to trying to engage in speaking, even though you don't you don't have it down, is appreciated. Being part of appreciating the culture and honoring the people that have spent lives here, I just think is an important part of everywhere that you go. But I think the people here are, one of the things that surprised me is just absolutely how overwhelmingly kind the people are here. Having spent so much time in LA and Chicago, just two big cities, I spent a lot of time in going to music conferences, going to music festivals. One of the things that just absolutely blew my mind, I was at a reggaeton festival at some point this last summer with a friend of mine who had warned me that the area of town that we were going into, he was warning me that it might not be, would be a little rougher. And we went to this festival, and there's probably 10,000 people at this festival. And I've been to many rap concerts, many different types of concerts, especially in Chicago. This was the most gracious crowd that I've ever been around at any event. Walking through the event when I had like a drink or two in my hand, people would excuse themselves out of your way and make sure that there was distance between people. And, when you were dancing, when you were moving around, people would give you space. And I had been to many concerts in my life, but never one that was just so, courteous from the people around. And that was at one of the, rougher reggaeton concerts. So just really appreciative of the arts here and how much people respect the arts here. The local square events that occur so often, which is great. I was out just a few days ago on the square in Old San Juan, and it was an absolutely beautiful concert that was set up for Christmas celebration that just continuously goes on. And it's really great to see how much the arts are promoted and respected here.
Awesome. Thanks. Ben, what about you?
Yeah, I think it just takes some getting used to. Like you said, it's an adventure, and you have to be ready for it. As on the personal level, on the business side, things are a little more bureaucratic. But that's because you're going through this process of, having these tax incentives provided, right? So for a small business operator, it was a little more difficult. I think in 2018, when I was setting up my business and getting all the paperwork and legal stuff done, it was a little less. There's a little less options than there are now for new entrants, which I think is good because it's showing the development of the whole island. But yeah, it's not perfect. It's not going to be what you expect. Nothing's ever as good or as bad as you expect it. So it's just kind of somewhere in between. So I really enjoyed down here. Made it my home. I found a way to navigate on my own and make the right friends and connections to have a healthy life. So and for a healthy business too.
Great, thank you. And some of the things as well that I want to hit on all this. There is a continuous forward progress being made on the island. One of the reasons I'm excited and doing what I'm doing, working in economic development, coming from tech startups and things like that, because that's how bullish I am on Puerto Rico. And on a macro level, Puerto Rico's come out of bankruptcy, come out of a longer depression, and is on an upswing, as the rest of the world, I feel like, is on a downturn. So we're actually in a very unique point in time here on the island that I've never seen before, at least in my lifetime. There's a huge opportunity for everyone to come work together and to really build and grow. And a lot of the pieces are putting into place. More government officials and everyone are coming on board. We have new Web3 clusters for different associations that are going to be announced soon, and different things like that, which is really exciting. And I'm also seeing, I think last month, there's a lot of more on the business, corporate, and investment standpoint of activity, even from acquisitions. I think our two largest AI companies, some of the fastest growing in the United States, like Wovenware and Rock Solid, have recently been acquired and by bigger companies. So there's a lot more interest that we're seeing continually year over year from bigger companies setting up and moving to the island. I mean, we've already had Microsoft here since I think 1989 and other major players. So they figured it out way before most other people, quite frankly. But as Ben had mentioned, things are also getting more accessible, more streamlined, more automated, bit by bit. Not perfect, but it's getting better every year. And I'm seeing and even able to help a lot of that. And then also just knowing, again, hitting on what you guys said, the population's very smart in general and overall bilingual, especially if you're in the city or anything like that. So that's a really strong point on multiple levels, especially for those and major companies that are expanding globally. We tend to be a perfect nexus for any company wanting to set up and have that hub between North and South America. So in that case, just not just bilingual. I think someone mentioned during blockchain we kind of panel bicultural, understanding the culture of South and Latin America as well as the States and North America as well is very interesting and unique, and makes for an amazing place to set up a business, especially a business that's looking to go global and want to be able to hit two birds or more with one stone in that regard. So thank you, everyone. Let's try to fit in a few questions. So if anyone in the audience has relevant questions, we'll try to answer the ones that make sense on here. If not, we'll follow up offline. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. Those will get sent over to us. That being said, while we're waiting on a couple questions, take 30 seconds, each of you, to share one or two projects, Web3 or technology projects on the island that's not yours that you're excited about. Let's start with Ben, then go Hannah, and then go Timothy.
I like tea because I thought of this idea 10 years ago when I first was thinking distributed apps and blockchain. I just never got around to doing it, and I wasn't smart enough to do it. So kudos to Timothy and Max who are working on that and their whole team. I'm excited to, I was going to put some time into digging into it more last year, but we got so busy at Chainwave that I didn't have time to dig into it. So Tim, I want to reach out to you after this and talk again. It's been almost a year since we talked, I think.
Hannah, what about you?
Oh, geez, projects that aren't mine. Tea is a cool one as well. There's lots of different things, but I think I'm going to go more of the community stuff, like, a lot of the just sort of community projects like, Brian, what you're doing, or the Blockchain Trade Association. A lot of that stuff I'm really excited about. Really excited about all of the education and building that's happening here. That's quite cool.
Okay.
So I'll say, reiterate, both of the people, Velas and Chainwave, both excellent organizations, but some of the more local things that I've noticed, Niftify is a very interesting platform that had some success, creating some interweave between, I think, one of the more well-known tattoo artists on the island and a project that he was doing to basically kind of reserve a space in his line, which was a really, really cool use of the technology that I saw here. PRBTA is awesome. I really love the work that Keiko's doing, a lot of the intersection here between some of the law and the opportunity that I think that we'll have the ability to enact, some sandboxing of some of the technologies that I'm interested in working on with potential government intersection here on the territory. That I think is really cool. Also very excited about organizations like DLTX, David Johnson's organization, the things that they're working on, things that they're promoting. But it's been great to see a lot of different funds and fund activity that's come from here, and people really trying to accelerate projects. I think now it should be said that if you are looking for investment in not only Web3 related, blockchain, Bitcoin related, but also for software, for venture, really Puerto Rico has to be one of your stops along the way. As an entrepreneur, I've raised capital all over the world, but the appetite for investment and making investments in the community of Puerto Rico is fantastic. And now we're seeing a lot of funds on the venture side domicile here. So some of those organizations have had success across many different aspects of the investment, but it's been great to see some of those grow.
Yeah, there's way too many for me to list, but high level, having more than just startups, I think is great. On the creative side, with all the different NFT and other projects, I've come across music and arts and other types that are working on things. We have, as you mentioned, DLTX and publicly traded blockchain and Web3 infrastructure type companies, Pantera Capital and other big names on the fund side. And then a lot of small ones was also mentioned. That is amazing. And then I'm excited on like a foundational level that how much support there is for especially early stage entrepreneurs, companies. Like, for example, when I tell people this, it kind of blows your mind a little bit, like how many accelerators, incubators, and that sort of programs are on the island. At least as of about a month ago, when I ran the numbers, we had 42 on the island of Puerto Rico of all different types. And there's more. I'm aware of 3 that are just Web3 related, getting started soon. But there's food specific ones, there's energy specific ones, there's early stage, there's mid stage. So there's a lot of different groups. A lot of them are new, but there's been ones who've been on the island for a number of years, whether it's Parallel 18, Grupo Guayacán, Centro para Emprendedores. There's different groups here to help businesses when they plug in, and there's a lot of resources. So regardless of what size company you guys have, anyone who's listening, reach out. I work a lot with the ecosystem, plugging it in. We have some really interesting things in mapping that we'll be pushing out publicly, probably around end of Q1 this coming year. So there's a lot on that front. Reading one of the questions, what recommendations would you give for areas of Puerto Rico outside of San Juan to attract entrepreneurs? I'll jump into this one really quick. I'd look into, depending on the lifestyle that you want, you can look on the west side near Rincon or Aguadilla or Mayagüez. Mayagüez has one of our top engineering schools. That's going to be a little bit, maybe a little slower paced than being in the metro area, a lot more access to surfing and more wide open spaces readily available. So depending on the lifestyle, I always live outside of the main area. So I used to live on the side of a mountain in the rural part of Guaynabo. Now I live in Toa Baja in a neighborhood that's really good for little kids because I have 4 little kids. So depending on what you're looking for, I've seen a lot of people recently going on the east side by Rio Grande, Humacao, and Palmas del Mar. There's a lot happening over there as well. But it really depends on the type of lifestyle you want. If you want mountainous living, beachfront living, city living, country living, as long as you're not expecting snow or anything like that, you can probably find something that probably checks most of those boxes.
Real quick, Brian,
yeah.
I think it looks to me the question asks, what recommendations would you give for areas to attract? To where, how can those areas attract more entrepreneurs?
Sure,
might be the question. And
there we go.
one of the things that I would say about that is reliable transportation and making sure that people can, in larger groups, be able to get back and forth. I love going to Rincon, Ponce, and all the different areas, but making sure that, especially people that are out on these first times visiting, that there is common services that people now use to be able to use for transportation and for the convenience of goods, like Uber and like DoorDash and some of the other services that people are used to in larger cities. Making sure that those services are available, and oftentimes they are, but that would be one thing. If the question is more directed at how do the smaller areas attract more, it would be with more, reliable application services and transportation.
Yeah, and explaining how to access the things. Maybe it's not as readily available, but if you do A, B, and C, you can get what you need, sort of thing. Also, I mean, again, depending on where it is, other cities, Caguas, Ponce, other areas have been doing good, have opened their first accelerators or incubators, many times working with the mayors in the towns. And there's a lot of mayors that are open at this point. So if anyone's listening who's already on the island and not in one of the metro main areas, definitely plug in to local officials. And if you need help with that, feel free to reach out to us at InvestPR as well. And there's other groups who are willing to help on that front. Hannah, for this question, is as a woman in Web3, have you been able to plug in at all to any groups or find anyone else, any other women that are working on projects? And can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. During Blockchain Week, was that last week? There was a Women in Web3 event that happened here, and I believe that was organized by the Puerto Rico Blockchain Trade Association. So I think that's, and also sponsored by Crypto Curious. So I think that's Keiko's group. And so Keiko and Shirley are the two people I think that spend a lot of time on that. So I don't know if there's any group specifically focused on that, but there was just an event for it. And that was very cool. I got to go hang out with those people there and talk about a lot of it was interesting NFT projects that they were discussing at that one. But yeah. There's definitely a community for that here. And it was just an event last week. Yep.
Yeah. And when some of I think there was even the Biddle Here conference, there was a panel on that with some more resources. And when that comes up, I think they video recorded it. We'll have to check and see. We'll try to share those things out as well. But there's a strong group of women in Web3 doing all sorts of projects that you can plug into. So we're almost at that time. Anything else burning from the panelists that you just want to get out in front of everyone or anyone who's thinking to move down here? And if not, that's okay. I think we went over a lot of information. That'll be great for everyone to listen to. So if you have anything, just speak up now. And if not,
I really like to text my friends and family just random pictures of like palm trees around here. They're all back in Chicago, and this is great fun, and I highly recommend it.
I definitely recommend at least getting down here, checking it out. And, I like to spend at least a half an hour to an hour in the ocean every day, which is nice. It really clears my mind and seems to clear, my senses. So love having the ability to do that.
Yeah, I would say too, if you're coming down, also organize it so that you can attend kind of one of the larger meetup groups and see the energy of the community. I think that's incredibly important to get a visible reaffirmation of, one of the biggest components of coming down here, as a small entrepreneur group that we have.
Yeah. So on that note, on the second Wednesdays of every month, the Uncommon Entrepreneur Group meets in San Juan, and we have around 200, sometimes up to 250 people, all entrepreneurs from all sorts of industries and sectors, not just Web3 that meet up. But there's a lot going on. You can check meetup.com, Eventbrite. There's things going on at the Tea House all over the place that you can plug into. There's even West Coast crypto groups that meet every Tuesday in Rincon and Aguadilla. So there's a lot to plug into. Thank you, everyone. Feel free to check out and follow and even reach out to any of us here on this panel today. With any other questions, you can always reach out to us at Invest Puerto Rico, just investpr.org, and you'll get a recording of this video sent to you if you've signed up. Feel free to share it with anyone who you might think is interested. And if you come up with any questions after the fact, just send them over and we'll get them answered for you. So thanks, everyone. And we hope to be building with you soon from Puerto Rico.